Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. This is not an easy podcast for me to make. I want to say some things today, very frankly and candidly. The President of the United States this morning announced a whole civilization will die tonight if the Strait of Hormuz is not opened. But the operative words are, a whole civilization will die tonight. These are the words of President Donald John Trump on Truth Social. I am deeply troubled because I believe that a president who can make that kind of threat is a danger not only to our country, but to the world. This is a moment of truth for the American people. Who do we have in the White House? And let me explain what I mean by that, because I think it's very important to really talk about it. And I may lose some listeners today who will be angry at me for saying this. But I believe Donald Trump is unstable. I believe that Donald Trump is unfit to be president of the United States. Last night, I was asked about invoking the 25th Amendment. My answer was clear. The 25th Amendment will not be invoked in this case because the Republican Party, well, they're not willing to do it. And by the way, the 25th Amendment is not intended to be a political instrument. It was intended to be an instrument in case a president became ill or incapacitated. Donald Trump is clearly not incapacitated and clearly not ill. He has a sense of what he wants to accomplish, and he believes he can do it by making these kinds of threats. We have already started a military action in Iran. We've seen it on the island that controls much of the oil, 90% of the oil, which leaves Iran. We are seeing and witnessing now the mobilization of American might by the President of the United States. We have troops in the Middle East. And let me explain to you that I spoke with a military analyst who said, when you put that much money and that many troops on the ground, all things are possible. So what's going to happen in the next 12 hours? That's right, by 5 o'clock this evening, we will know, theoretically, whether the president is going to act or not. And I would point out that J.D. Vance is very much a part of this. J.D. Vance is at this moment in Hungary campaigning for Orban for re-election. That's right. We have a sitting vice president of the United States of America who is campaigning for a dictator in Hungary. It is also true that J.D. Vance has been an integral player in what is happening in Iran. Remember, he was the one who was tasked with putting everybody together and trying to come up with a solution. Am I concerned? The answer is yes. And I want to remind you all of the extraordinary power of a president of the United States. It is not just militarily, it's diplomatically. First, remember, Harry Truman, who made the decision to unilaterally recognize Israel at its birth in 1948. It was Truman's decision, no one else's. Let me remind you of Eisenhower's decision to force the British and the French out of Suez in 1956. They actually left in March of 57. But it was Eisenhower's decision. Kennedy and Cuba, the Bay of Pigs. Well, the Bay of Pigs happened, and then came the Cuban Missile Crisis. But in the end, when you read about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you read the eyewitness accounts, including Robert F. Kennedy's account, published posthumously, you can see clearly that John F. Kennedy made the strategic decisions, which, frankly, forced the Soviet Union to back down. It was Kennedy's decision. Lyndon Johnson made decisions on Vietnam unilaterally. He consulted with the military, but it was Johnson's war, and we called it Johnson's war. And Nixon, who unilaterally made the decision to go to China. Nobody forced him to do it. It was his grand strategy. And as President of the United States, without any approval from anyone, he did it. And you can go through each and every president, including Gerald Ford, who made the decision when Congress would not appropriate the money to wage a war to save South Vietnam, that we would let South Vietnam go. And you can go through every president of the United States. I remember Jimmy Carter at Camp David. He made the decisions which allowed the Camp David Agreement and ultimately the peace treaty with Israel and Egypt to go through. Ronald Reagan. We saw Reagan make innumerable military decisions. Unilateral. He made the decision. And the same applies to every president. I don't need to recount all of this to you, but I want to demonstrate to you today the extraordinary power of a president of the United States. And we will witness that in the next few hours. Will we proceed, as Donald Trump is suggesting, to remake Iran? That's right, because that is essentially what Donald Trump is talking about. When you talk about taking out all electricity, all power, all water, when you talk about, and he used the term, bombing them back to the Stone Ages, then you have a president of the United States who you either agree with or disagree with. Now, there is only one parallel that I can think of, and that was the decision by Harry Truman to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki with atomic weapons. Now, Truman reflected on it, and I've never forgotten it. I actually have a recording of Truman talking about it. It was a question of American lives. And he said that General Marshall came to him and said, "We will lose 1 million American lives if we invade Japan. The alternative is to use these weapons." And it's a very interesting fact. My father, who was in the military in those days, in the 77th Division, was a doctor. And he instructed his men to write letters home, because if there were an invasion and they wanted to say goodbye, they'd have to do it by letter. Was Truman right or wrong in ordering the bombing of Japan, using a weapon like that? Now, the great humanitarian and former First Lady, Mrs. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, said when the bomb was dropped, ending the war was what was the priority. So every president has to put in perspective what it is they want to do. When Truman was asked whether or not he lost sleep over his decision, he answered directly, "Nope. I made the decision. I believe it was the right decision to make. I went to bed and I never thought about it again." It is unique for a president of the United States to be able to make a statement like that. And a president of the United States has ultimate power. So as I record these words to you, as we approach the 7 o'clock hour this morning, time is ticking. And tonight, the President of the United States will decide what to do. Preliminarily, Kharg Island, as I mentioned a moment ago, has already been hit. But we know that the United States military, the greatest military in the world, using the greatest technology in the world, has the ability, if they know what they're going to hit, well, to take it out. And so when President Trump says that he can take out the power plants, the water sources, when he says it, I believe he knows it. And the question becomes, what does the military do? The military is trained, clearly, that if the President of the United States gives an order, the order is to be carried out. Now, we had a major shift in the Army this last week. Was there opposition to Donald Trump's plans? And did individuals in the military simply say, we won't do it? We don't know. We really don't know. But history will tell us. And if tonight there is an attack, we will know sooner rather than later the United States' view of what has happened and what led up to what may well be done. This is a decisive moment in history. When the president speaks of ending a civilization, he is speaking about Iran and the military power of the United States of America. When I said to you at the very beginning of this podcast that I might lose listeners for making the statements that I am making today, I want you to understand why I'm making them. I do not believe that Donald Trump is a balanced individual. I do not believe that he is fit to be President of the United States. Yet, there is nothing that we can do in the next hours to prevent him from making a decision one way or the other. The world moves too quickly, and the Republicans in Congress are almost entirely uncritical of Donald Trump. This makes, in my judgment, for a toxic combination. It is clear to me that what will happen in the next few hours will in large measure determine what happens next in the world. Our NATO allies are looking carefully at what we are doing. China and Russia are looking carefully at what we are doing. And the important thing to understand is that it all rests in the judgment of one man, the President of the United States. And when he was asked some months ago how he will determine what he will do, his answer disturbed me. He said he would proceed as his gut instinct told him. I want to know what you think about this. And maybe some of you will say, John, you're overreacting. Am I? We will know in just a few hours. I spoke with one person today, early this morning, who has defended to a degree what Donald Trump is doing. But he said, if this happens, it will be unacceptable and I will oppose him. The problem is that the opposition will come too late. There is an accountability here, and I want my position to be on the record. I believe that Donald Trump is a danger to America and to the world. I believe his statements reflect that. And any president who can lightly say that he will end a civilization, well, that disturbs me. Doesn't it disturb you too? We'll find out in just a few hours. And I'm waiting, like you are, for the judgment of a president and ultimately the judgment of history and the American people. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. And I urge you to do so. Friday is just around the corner, and I know there will be a lot of questions, and I can't wait. Remember, please, to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. The show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on the advertising support that we have. There are requests for other advertisers to join in, and we will make some determinations in the days ahead. In the meantime, stay tuned. Watch the news. Who knows where we'll be tomorrow? But I can tell you, we will be on pins and needles all day to see how this develops. My special appreciation to Gogo Zoger, who is the producer of this podcast, makes it all happen and does such a great job. I am John Rothman. I'll be on pins and needles all day. But we'll be back tomorrow, right here with more on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.